All right, I'm going to present my desktop. Maybe wait a minute or so before we get started. I'll tell you what I plan to do. I wanted to show everyone some slides of Linkerd, which I consider to be our big competition, and they have been considered doing really well in the UX area. So maybe that would inspire some people here to do some UX things for Istio. I had planned on having a colleague of mine show the destination rule manager prototype. She couldn't make it. We will schedule that for a future meeting. Then I have some stuff on the install. I want to show some slides I made on the difficulty of the install. I'm not an expert on the operator. Would like to hear some thoughts on that, but we can briefly discuss it, and then maybe skip this mesh proposal. Then we have some talk about Istio control to do. Some PRs and some new features that have been proposed. So let me bring up the Linkerd. So I installed Linkerd recently. It's very nice to install. You run the first command, and the output tells you to run the next two commands. They don't have a lot of options, so it literally is just this to do the install.
Asking me as it gets closer, and I was like,
we should try to improve our install if possible for the default path. And anybody who wants to jump in as I talk about stuff, the next thing you do with Linkerd is to see if your control plane is healthy. There's a sanity check, Linkerd check, that does a lot of the stuff that we do with our new verify install command, but it just sort of prettier. It explicitly calls out everything that it's doing, and if you run their command while the pod is starting up, while it's still pulling the Linkerd control plane, you'll see little animated things waiting here. Another really nice thing that they do on their install is they will tell you if the version of the control plane you're running is the latest version. So I didn't install the back level version, but it would have told me if I had done that. So this is a very nice feature that we're trying to move our verify install towards, but any improvements there would be great. So the real meat of the user experience for Linkerd comes if you do Linkerd dashboard. It starts a server on your local machine and opens the browser to a screen that looks like this. And I have a live version of that running right now. I'll bring up. So when you go to the overview, it lists all of the namespaces on your cluster. And if that namespace is participating in Linkerd, it will say meshed. Now, I didn't actually try to install any demos. I just typed this after a fresh install. So the only thing meshed is their own control plane namespace, Linkerd. But automatically, it gives this great view of their services with some of the things that we record in Prometheus, but they're putting here sort of live. So this is being literally live updated right now. And then direct links to the Grafana that we have, or that they have. They also install a Grafana in their control plane, but with a link to take you right to a particular view for a particular app. So this is nice. And just based on seeing that, that's why we have this baby step in Istio 1.2, the Istio control experimental dashboard command that brings up all of our things, Grafana and Kiali and things, without the user having to know like what ports to forward. Any questions about the first step I've been showing?
Hi, Ed, Neeraj here. Quick question. Uh, so I see from the last two meetings we have been trying to compare and contrast Istio and Linkerd. I was trying to get at the final intent here. Like,
Oops. So I see two intentions. First, if they have some good stuff that we feel would be easy for us to add, we should add it. The second is that we hope to, be able to capture Linkerd users who need more power from our richer things. So it would be good for us to at least know sort of the terminology they use, so we can say, when you have a meshed namespace, we have a labeled namespace and that kind of thing, just to level set us, to help us talk.
I see. I mean, since both are open source projects, it just feels a little awkward doing this not in cooperation with the other open source project.
So definitely, I agree. If we should help them as needed. But I wanted to let everyone see, because some of the people here have been maybe working on Istio in a tunnel and haven't seen sort of what's out there. So I want to, if we can make things easier for ourselves, let's take a look, just for the benefit of everyone, right? The idea of a service mesh is a universal concept, and we don't want to recreate all the difficulties we had, like DOS versus Unix line endings and things, if there's some real similarities that could be adopted. That's just my 2 cents. It's not IBM's official position, but I think we should take a look.
Thanks for clarifying. I just wanted to make sure I understand what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Niraj, it's a good point of reflection. I agree. I know it was a point of conversation that we had on that service mesh day last week. So, one thing to your point, Ed, one thing that is, that would be beneficial to all is, I guess, to the extent that the nomenclature that we end up coming to some of the same nomenclature. So generally, as some were to say, mesh expansion or some service mesh specific term, that if each of the projects or each of the vendors or what have you were to generally use it in the same way, all users would benefit. All projects would benefit because it doesn't have to be context specific. So to that, at least to that extent, I can readily identify where that'd be super helpful if namespace meant the same dang thing everywhere everywhere you went. So, or tap, what the heck is that? And so, yeah.
Thank you, Lee. So let's sort of blaze through the other features that we have in Linkerd's UI. There's a top feature. Choose sort of the namespace you want, click Start, and it will start reporting all of the traffic that's happening there. So it's a very nice skin on the important things that you can get out of telemetry, and you can stop that. Top routes, which is a similar tool to take a look at various namespaces and how they're communicating, what's happening, and they're filtered for things. They have a button to, looks like Start, nope, not good. They have a button to create a new profile, which I thought was interesting. If you create a new profile, like it sort of lets, I believe, I haven't done this, but I believe this is how you describe a service. If you click download, it doesn't ask you a bunch of questions about your service. It brings up a YAML file. Let's cancel that and look at my slide. The YAML file just shows, it's just boilerplate. So I thought that was interesting UI choice, that instead of sort of asking you about all of your paths and HTTP methods on a complicated form, They just sort of give you like, here's what a service looks like, uncomment the things you want, change the things that you need, and then you're done. Thought that was kind of inspiring.
So what's the service profile?
So it seems to be similar to our virtual service. It has, rules for path regular expressions, and status conditions and retries, sort of the stuff that we do. And this is how they expose it through a YAML document, same as we do. But just instead of pointing people to the documentation, they just give you a highly commented out one.
It's interesting, though, if this is sort of a nomenclature issue where we diverge. We call it virtual service, they call it service profile. And, CNCF, you would think, would like this stuff to all be kind of the uniform naming
Agreed.
concept.
So I thought that was interesting. They have a sort of service mesh command that sort of tells you just a summary, and then it sort of prompts you to connect namespaces to it. So this is sort of setting up their injection, giving you the command on the CLI to do it, linkerd inject, and then some namespace options. And it sort of tells you how many pods are there and what sorts of things you're doing. So that's pretty simple. This resources, or let me go back to the live actually. Resources tab, just giving you information about things like your pods. Documentation just takes you to their homepage, and this help that just takes you to their GitHub and their Slack and their mailing list. So very simple. The people who've seen this have said we should have something like this. Whether we do or not, this is how another service mesh does it. Thoughts?
So do they have destination rule or gateway similar concepts also? Because it sounds like their service profile doesn't really define the ingress layer or the destination layer. I was just curious.
So I don't know. I didn't go deep into actually going through their tutorials and seeing how to do everything.
Okay.
Mostly I just brought it up to see what sort of you can have when you kick the tires.
Yeah, the reason I ask is from the Service Mesh conference, there are users, I think multiple users, that did indicate that it's interesting for their developers, like the handshake between the devs and the operators is typically just a page of configuration, and that's all they need. So basically, the microservice developer would say, hey, these are the recommended configuration I would like, and it doesn't have to be in the Istio format. It could be, this is the retries I would like, and this is which services I'm talking to, or which services depends on me. So it could be a list of configuration, and then the ops team would take that configuration and then using their Istio knowledge, which the dev team doesn't have to have Istio knowledge, and then translate that into Istio YAML because there's a learning curve involved. But then the nice thing is the team gone through the learning of complexity of Istio, but the devs doesn't have to learn it.
So that makes sense. I imagine it's this document, although maybe it's something different, where the developers sort of say what paths are available, what kind of retries they expect, what kind of timing they expect. It's good thoughts. Thank you, Len.
Sorry, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question regarding, today we have like some of the feature provided by Chiari, and we want to add such kind of Istio dashboard. So the question is like we will have different feature separated between two tools or two dashboards. So is there any idea to have a single place where we have all the features in the same place, within the same tool?
So we want that. So like I say, as a baby step in Istio 1.2, I've merged this week this ability. You can type Istio control experimental dashboard Kiali, and it just brings up Kiali dashboard. So at least users will find it if they've installed it, and they won't need to know what port it is and how to get there. I know there's some people at IBM trying to look at integrating with the open source CUI shell. There are, I'm sure, other open source efforts. I don't know what the best way to sort of bring all these tools together is. I'm hoping that we can have, discussion as part of this work group on how we get the.
Yeah, because what we have actually, like with the last version with Kiali, we got Kiali with some information, and then from Kiali we can go to distributed tracing, we can go to Prometheus. So I'm seeing that like, okay, this is like the central point when I should go the first time, which is Kiali, and then if I wanted to deep dive, I need to go like distributed tracing, Prometheus, stuff like that. I go from there. So is that the strategy, or we keep these two separated and we choose the right tool depending on the deployment scenario?
Right. I've mostly just used Kiali to sort of visualize my traffic and things. I'm not super deep in using it for other things.
Yeah. Okay, because we got like the list of rules that we implement, stuff like that. We can check that if there is some rule is configured, like destination rules, stuff like that.
Do we think that stuff should be exposed through a command line, like so that a user could type it, or do we like going to a graphical page? How would a user, like, say, validate a deployment as part of a build process script?
Yeah, I would prefer both of them. But yeah, I prefer like, okay, I have such kind of command, so I can use it on an operator, so I can use it to check when I'm debugging my service mesh. And if I go like to Kiali or Istio dashboard, if there is something going wrong, I get like a red button telling me that this is the configuration. If I use like asterisk on virtual host, stuff like that. That's what Kiali do actually. So,
okay.
But the question was being if we need to put more feature on Kiali or add more feature to Istio dashboard and have two separate tools with different features.
Right. I can't say. So I've been validating with Istio Vet from Aspen Mesh. I have not been validating with Kiali. Maybe I should practice that and see how it works.
Okay.
The question on Kiali, is that designed just to work with Istio? Would it be considered to even work beyond Istio? Because I worry if we fold a lot of the Istio unique stuff into Kiali, it may not fit the project's initial goal.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
Should we? So last time we had a few weeks ago we had an overview of Kiali. Should we do a deep dive on any particular features of Kiali at the next meeting in 2 weeks? Because one thing we're going to need is to sort of direct people, like when people have a problem with validation or something, our documentation could say, go to Kiali and look at this page to see if you have any problems, or it could say, run Istio Vet, or it could say just look for poorly named service ports. So we want to guide people to the right documentation, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to have debug information, how Kiali can help us. The other thing would be the roadmap for Kiali. What is their roadmap in the next short term? I think that would be super interesting to us too.
And we also need to. I think what Rafik is trying to say. we need to agree on a formal dashboard or whatever our equivalent is for that you just showed for Linkerd. What is that for Istio? And I think if we can agree that we're interested in Kiali being the one dashboard where you can from there launch all the other ones, then we can focus on whether we should add features to Kiali or do something else in parallel. And if as a community, if we can agree on that, then we can invite the Kiali community to get on call and talk about their roadmap and see if they're interested in being the dashboard for Istio. So if you look at Kiali's website and read all their features, it seems like a lot of the screenshots that they're using are directly from Istio. So they're kind of positioning themselves as the dashboard for Istio. Should that just be more formal for us to continue?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. If they're sort of, suitable and want to be the main entry point, that's the dashboard that you start at. And then, I think Ed pointed out that we need CLI kind of equivalents of a lot of the functions. But again, the central point from a UI perspective could be Kiali. So I think we need to make that decision soon. Otherwise, we're going down a path of trying to invent some other thing that we can launch Kiali from, which seems kind of stupid.
Well, there's
to just extend Kiali.
There's somewhat of a layering concern I have that in order for the core of Istio to be usable, you need to install this extra add-on, Kiali. But if there's going to be such a tight coupling between the two, then perhaps Kiali should be part of the Istio project.
But I think the point that Ed was making, so there's got to be another CLI kind of equivalent way. So you could do this without the fancy GUI part. If you have a GUI, then it's Kiali. But maybe you're right, Martin. It still would probably, if it's that tightly linked to Istio, it should probably be part of our code base rather than a separate repository.
Yeah, I know we discussed this a little bit in the steering committee a couple of weeks ago. I don't think there was any definitive outcome there.
Okay.
So, Ed, could you explain a little what Istio Vet is?
Istio Vet is just a validation tool from Aspen Mesh that was presented here a few weeks ago, and it sort of tells you if your ports have poor names or if your virtual services are not hooked up to gateways properly. It's just a validation in the large. Istio's validation webhook and the command line validation only tell you about a single item that's being added, whereas that Vet tool pulls in all of your Istio resources and some of your Kubernetes things like services and sort of apply some additional ad hoc type validation.
Okay, so doing that kind of stuff is one of the reasons we introduced Galley. So I guess we should cooperate and see if we can move some of these checks into Galley proper.
So I have been working with Oz from Google, I think, and there are multiple efforts going on. One will be to move some of the functionality of Istio Vet into somewhere inside Istio that I think will be useful.
Yeah, that would be Galley. Yeah.
And yes, I mean, I think that was his proposal is, but I'm not sure. Additionally, in the short term, I think we can also benefit from just linking in the Istio docs out to Istio Vet to say you can try this out to know quickly if you have misconfigurations.
Yep, we should do that.
And just to emphasize on Ed's point, we are not replacing the functionality in Istio CTL or Galley, which does a single resource static analysis. That still remains there.
Yeah, so we ultimately, one of the motivations for Galley was to support doing referential integrity checks. And so that, which implies looking at many resources at once. So we just didn't get there for 1.1. But
for Martin, for 1.2, are we going to put a status or some field on our resources? So it would be great if there was like a status field that sort of said, this virtual service is referring to a gateway that's just been deleted or something.
Yeah, that's high on our request list, but for 1.2, we're not. We're just focusing on our engineering processes mostly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we have people like Knative. Knative wants to be able to deploy Istio resources and know when they're available. And right now they just have to kind of send fake traffic until the traffic works. And so we really need the status to be reported. It ends up being a complicated proposition though, because one CRD results in configuration for 1,000 different pods to be updated, and maybe one of those pods is not happy.
I understand. So the next item I want to get to on the agenda, if we can, is installation. So we wanted to talk about simplifying the install. And towards that end, I wanted to first talk about the current install a bit. We have a lot of options on our install. And one thing that I did, so I've been, I want to make it easier. So I looked at Linkerd was, this one command. I have been using some IBM products that sort of give you a graphical front end for Helm charts. And this turned out to be extremely difficult experience with Istio. So there's so many settings, and those settings are either not documented well on our page, or there's just too many of them. So I started taking screenshots of the complete screen for this graphical form front end for our options: pod security, parameters, global settings, the ingress name. Do I want the HTTPS? What's the name of this proxy? So the people who put this together just took everything in values.yaml and made a form for it. So suddenly this becomes extremely huge, and it was impossible to find the stuff that I cared about, like enable tracing or mutual TLS, in this huge wave of screens that were being generated by this tool. And eventually I sort of gave up after about 9 screens and got really frustrated. Then I talked to Frank about the configuration profiles and how nice they were, but then I like to, I install like this with the Helm template install, and when I want to redo things, I just sort of run it again, and I make heavy use of this install page, which lists all of our options, many of which have no description. So, I don't really need a description for the cert manager's thing, but for a lot of the things that we do, like this outbound traffic policy mode, which has been getting a lot of discussion, it just says allow any, it doesn't show you the other choice. We have to figure this out, and I guess the operator, the Istio operator that we've been talking about, is a solution for that, although I haven't really researched the operator well.
Well, I think it's a partial solution, so the operator is going to provide a nicer, more structured way to manage this with a single CRD that we can schematize, heavily comment, and that kind of stuff. However, there's some customers that'll never want to use the operator. Right, they'll continue to want to run their values.yaml. So we really need to figure out how to solve values.yaml on its own, with proper metadata, proper annotations, and that kind of stuff.
So the interesting part of the operator is sort of defining essentially an API that represents some composite set of settings, kind of like a profile, but it's more like a number of settings that can be kind of turned on or off that are interesting to everybody, kind of thing. Like I want to turn on egress or something, the egress gateway or something like that, and then there might be a few things that get tweaked, so there'd be a egress gateway kind of thing. But I think fundamentally what's interesting about this is the ability to sort of define things that are more like features rather than, settings in a Helm chart or even like a very high level profile. It's specific kind of features you want to turn on and off, right?
Yeah, and we actually started to review the CRD, which is in itself quite large, and it became clear we were muddying the distinction between what's programming a feature versus what's flipping some particular options for deployment of a particular component. Like, so you want to turn on caching. Well, that's really not a feature that's kind of programming the binary. So we're separating this, making it very clear. There's some stuff that is in values.yaml that really should just be a regular CRD that the user interacts with at the CRD level, not by programming, not through to Helm. So we'll clean that up. I think we'll clean up the values.yaml as well, but we still need to fully document and structure the YAML so it's consumable.
The thing I liked most about the operator was that there's going to be this CRD with everything here, because it's been my experience that the stuff that we want maybe isn't here. So a lot of times I have this experience where maybe my friend installed Istio for me, and I don't have a good way to know what settings were chosen. Right. So independent of this, I was wondering if there was any interest in doing a reverse mapping of the Helm so that you could sort of see what was chosen based on inspection of the various things in Istio, like the deployment of Pilot and the deployment of Galley and settings. So the idea would be that you would do some kind of thing, maybe Istio control, maybe some other tool that would sort of tell you everything that had been set so you could recreate that on another cluster.
So I was suggesting to Martin Ostrowski, who's working on the operator, that for values.yaml, so we want the richer documentation and the richer schema associated with this, that we should actually represent values.yaml as a proto, because that has a richer schema, and we have a tool to generate documentation, high quality docs for that. And from that, you can then produce the YAML files that the user is consuming. And if you have that pipeline, that it means you have a proto. You can also consume resources from Kubernetes, apply them to that proto, and then do your transformation on that and achieve what you just were asking for.
Well, that sounds great. So you think this would be like a two-way transformation? The same proto that I use to set up Helm, everyone using Istio would be able to see.
Yeah.
Great.
Just go. So you know the default of what you want, the default values.yaml. So you initialize your proto with that. You read what's actually in the cluster, and then you compare the two. So yeah.
So currently, all the Helm templates are, full of logic, and the reverse logic was missing. So that was my thought.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Nobody's doing this, but
okay. Well,
I think the same argument though applies that it's not that interesting to be able to, ask, what of these 150 or 500 settings that are available in values.yaml are turned on for me. It's much more important to understand at a higher level what features have been turned on and off. So that's sort of should be the vocabulary that we use with users, right?
Well, we want the vocabulary here. So if I'm talking about traffic mode policy, I want to be able to sort of, run some command, grep traffic mode policy to see this, so I can sort of say, what traffic mode policy do you have? Because if the answer to my question of why doesn't my pod work is your traffic mode policy is not there, you need a service entry if you don't have allow any. I need like a one-liner or a two-liner to be able to tell people to run to show me what they got.
Yeah, no, I think your point is just that the traffic mode policy is a very important thing that the users need to be able to understand if it's on or allow any or not.
It's hard to,
not all these things, right?
But most of these are that nobody cares about. Like how many galleys are we going to scale up to? Maybe not interesting, but this one is particularly tricky because in the documentation, maybe it's got spaces, maybe here it's got the word global and mode in front of it, and the search maybe doesn't want to see it. So it's a little tricky.
So, but Ed, I do believe, I think I agree with Frank. I think just a good organization of these values around features will help simplify this a lot. And you're highlighting some of the more important variables or values which might not be reflected in one or two features, so we can handle them separately. But if we just make some intermediate steps to cluster these in terms of features and turning them on or off, we can make it much more simpler rather than, I mean, I agree we can go all the way to creating a proto file, but I don't think that's going to happen soon.
Well, I don't know. Martin seemed to be engaged in doing this, but what will happen soon is the operator. So I expect that most customers will want to interact with the operator, and then you do get that experience kind of naturally. You can look at the CRD, see what the state it's at, see if it's been fully deployed or still in the process of being deployed.
Right, so that would be great because so many settings like this mesh networks thing, you know, it's so important to know what other networks you're multi-clustering with, and if your only documentation is that it's this, it's tough. Okay. Yeah,
to a certain extent, some of this stuff is kind of a black hole. Right? You configure it in Helm, and then it's gone.
Yes, and I have a proposal for this Istio control mesh command, which I don't know if I was going to talk about today or if I was going to try to bring that to the config or networking meeting, but it would be so great to be able to view sort of what multi-cluster stuff you've got set up. So do we have anything else to say about install before we talk about the Istio control subcommands? Great. So we have two things probably we want to talk about, or that we have time to talk about. Lynn has a list of some of the recent proposals I'm going to go to in a second. And then we have the pull request for TLS. And I believe the author's on the call. And two things. One is we want to take a look at this as the right sort of design for the command. And then also, currently this tool has no tests, and the question was, what's the bar for getting things into Istio control experimental? Should we let people just put stuff in? Should we make them do this in a branch or in a Istio ecosystem project? What is the rule for sort of proof of concept things? In this case, it was for this RBAC debugging tool to replace something that was in 1.0 that didn't make it into 1.1 because it didn't work. So we pulled it out of 1.1.
So can I add something? So regarding the test, I think most of the Istio commands we only have unit tests, and they are simple unit tests, like we are providing some config dump as input, and we are searching the command output for some specific string. That's the unit test we have today, and I don't think we have end-to-end test for those Istio commands, and I feel that is not necessary to add like end-to-end test for Istio.
So you're completely right that we don't. Another thing that I'm dealing with right now is some regressions in some of the commands, like this proxy config thing is saying, look, there's a difference. This cluster is static, and Envoy is saying it's got no value of it for its type because there were no end-to-end tests for it. So what we're seeing is like things where what gets pushed to Envoy changes or Envoy version changes, and any command line tool that is asking Envoy config dump and then parsing that, and we're using a static file for unit testing it, is starting to break as we go to new Envoy versions. And that's going to be worse when we start doing the secret discovery service stuff. So I'm hoping that we can, and that's not part of your PR. There should be end-to-end tests done by somebody else completely. But we do need to know how much test is going to be needed to be in.
I think so. We have seen multiple times that the Envoy API changes that breaks Istio. It's not related to Istio actually. So most of the API in the SDS API is used by pilot in the generation of the Envoy config. So if the upstream Envoy API changes, it will first break pilot. And Istio, those commands using the config dump, they are using a subset of the config used by pilot. And nowadays, I think we don't have a good approach to catch this. We usually only find we are broken when we are syncing the API, and then we have to fix it manually. That's yeah.
Also, would that be addressed by having some sort of nightly job that takes the latest Envoy and just tries things on there? You still end up finding the problem after it's been introduced in Envoy, but it's better than 5 days before Istio is released, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm if no one else wants to, I'm going to try my hand at making some end-to-end tests for Istio control, because I think that's going to be needed, because I want more people to contribute to Istio control. So having more tests for it means it'll be easier to sort of review those contributions. As for the particular one we're talking about, it is this one. I don't know if we want to discuss that on this meeting, or if it's, since it's more of a networking thing, if its design should be discussed there.
So can I do a quick demo of this proof of concept?
Sure.
I'm going to write a design doc for this one. It's about what should be included and what can we do in this subcommand. So can I share my screen?
Sure, share your screen.
How can I do that?
So they click the up arrow on the WebEx.
I need to download something. Okay.
Oh, well, it may be that WebEx on your computer requires a download. So maybe we should take a look at Lynn's summary and then come back to you. Can you download that while we're looking at Lynn's summary?
Okay, I have downloaded it.
Okay, do you want to go first? Excellent, I see your screen.
Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so so currently we already have a auth command in Istio that will check the authentication policy as well as the destination rule to tell you that the mutual tier is sitting on both client side and server side. And what I'm doing now is to enhance that command and also provide support for JOT and RBAC rules. The existing Istio auth command works by talking to pilot and by getting those authentication policy and destination rule applied by customer and analyze them and output them in the command line. What I am doing here is a little bit different. It talks to the Envoy directly to get the config dump and analyze the mutual TLS, JOTs, RBAC based on the Envoy config directly. So theoretically, you can use it even without Istio, kind of, but now it relies on some assumptions from the pilot generation. So let me do a quick demo of what I'm doing now. So I have a bunch of pods in my cluster, and I can just run this Istio. I put it on the experimental, and oh, can anyone see my terminal?
We cannot.
Oh, I think I need to share my terminal as well. Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I put the auth command on the experimental. I only added a check, and then you give it a pod name, and you can run it. It will tell you the. It will tell. So currently, it only checks the listeners listening on the load IP. So this is used by Envoy to forward the traffic to the actual application. So for this product page, we can see it has two listening on its node IP. For the first one, we see it has a certificate, which means when a client is connecting to this port and this IP, Envoy will present this certificate for the client. And we can see the mutual is enabled and the mode is strict. And we can see there is no jot policy and there is no outbound policy. This is the config on the listener. We also have the config on the outbound clusters. The outbound cluster is used by Envoy when Envoy is connecting to some upstream servers. So we can know how does product page talks to, for example, details.default. And we can know how does product page talks to HTTP bin. So we can see in the certificate column, Envoy will present this certificate when it's talking to this upstream, and it will validate the upstream with this SAN in their certificate. And we know when Envoy talking to Kubernetes, it doesn't present any certificate and it doesn't require any certificate. So we can know it will use like a plain text to talk to the Kubernetes default. If we apply some sample policy, for example, I have prepared some job policy for product page, and if we provide a outbound policy, and we run this command again, okay, you can see we will present some brief description about we have enabled JOT, and the issuer should be testing at secure.istio.io, and we have enabled RBAC. We have only one rule. The rule name is service viewer. So this is still in very early stage. I just want to demo what I'm planning is we can, based on the Envoy config, we can get and analyze a lot of useful information, and we can analyze more than one port at a time. So we can pass it a client port and we can pass it a server port. So it can somehow analyze the listener and the cluster on both client side and server side and give you some information about the results, like whether the virtual TLS is setting correctly, whether the RBAC process is propagated to the Envoy, and things like this.
Sorry, just to clarify, you're saying that you can pass in a specific output port in that same command, and specifically you say, I'm interested in the connection to views from product page, and then it would give you basically the information from both sides. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So in the future we can extend it to like you can give it two port names. So it can analyze the relationship between the two port names. Like the first one is a client port. It analyzes how does it talk to other ports, like the second port. Yeah. So this is kind of like a static analysis of the Envoy config, and it gives you the information about the. Currently, I'm focusing on the security settings.
Yeah, this sounds cool, but it sounds like a whole branch of Istio control auth, a whole set of subcommands maybe. But this would be really nice in a UI too, back to the dashboard kind of thing. It would be nice to see that stuff in an actual UI page.
So I know I made some comments on the work item. I have some more to make. Do we want to go through this some more, or should we make comments on the work item and then have Yangman come back and present this again in a couple of weeks to us? How should we iterate on this?
Yeah, I'm preparing a more detailed design doc, and today it's just a proof of concept. I think it might be better we come back to this when I have the full design doc, so we can comment and review it more.
Okay. All right. Thank you for showing us this proof of concept that's in progress. So I want to show Lynn's summary of future Istio control stuff that we want to have. So I think it's some good stuff. Um, so the first thing was Istio control version, which actually it turned out I was mistaken. I thought that we didn't have a good Istio control version because at one point in the distant past when you had typed it, it had given you both the client and server version. It turns out we actually have client and server and a nice summary that comes if you do Istio control version minus remote minus short. So it's been lost in all of the testing. So if I literally do Istio control version remote short, it's very nice. Tells you all of the versions of all of your tools. But I don't know how people are going to find that because the default is so different.
Yeah, that seems the default should be something more like that.
It might break scripts if we change it now, so I don't know if we can, but it would be great.
Well, I think we should be able to change it for 1.2 because it's a major release. Because nobody knows that command basically add except for you, or maybe one or
You're
two
right.
others.
I didn't discover that until I went through the testing when we had testing day.
What's the output of just the version by itself?
Oh, if you do it by itself, it looks like cube control version, but it only gives you the client side.
The client.
And if you just do minus remote, it gives you a cube control version look-like thing, but for all of the Istio control plane. It's strange. So since we only have 7 minutes, I'll blaze through, but address your comments to these documents, which are all linked in the notes. Istio control install, and it turns out that Iris is working on a prerequisite check, so we can address it there. She currently hasn't uploaded her proposal to the UX folder, but that will happen very soon.
Yeah, but this install command, that's beyond prerequisites. The prerequisites was part of it. The goal is user can download the Istio CTL, and then from there, they can actually do an Istio install based on whatever profile they would like.
Yes. So another thing that's been interesting for people is that when you download Istio, it brings down this big directory full of stuff, the command line, the samples, all of the YAML and Helm stuff that you need. It turns out 95% of the download is Istio control, which is over 50 megs. The other 5% are all of the samples, all of the Helm, all of the tools, everything else. So
how big did you say it was? Did you say 50 megs?
50 megs.
No.
So if I literally go to Istio 1.1 and do DU, you can see that it's gigantic and that all of it is Istio control. And Istio control needs to be big, essentially because it's got huge numbers of imports for things like OAuth and gRPC and huge numbers of things.
But just 50 megabytes of code is outstanding. There's got to be some chunk of data in there somewhere or something.
I think it's all code, but if anybody knows how to shrink one of these executables, that would be a great thing to do for Istio control. Because like I say, most of the download, 95% of it is Istio control.
Wow.
So Istio control check, which is, so we have in progress this version check that Iris is doing. Lynn is proposing some more stuff to tell if the control plane is healthy and if we're on a good version. So the next question is kube inject. I had proposed a meshify command to sort of where you could sort of say Istio control inject that would not create YAML, but it would update the annotations on your pod or on your namespace and sort of invoke the Galley injector on something that's currently running. And we need to understand if we're trying to keep the current kube inject path or if we're trying to see if we can simplify it. People have been struggling with maybe kube inject because it had this hard-coded template that ran without Kubernetes that got out of sync with the config maps that is used by Galley. So different options were working on the command line with kube inject versus auto inject. Istio control get, and especially get all. So currently I've been doing, kube control get, passing in all this stuff, but of course that doesn't get all of the mixer things.
And you missed some of the stuff too. Yeah, like mesh policy was one of the stuff I added. It's just impossible to get everything right if you want to see all. It
is, and maybe Istio control get is still needed for console or other things that are unrelated to Kubernetes. So the question is, should we keep Istio control get as deprecated, or should we try to reintroduce it?
Well, I think we should reintroduce it unless we can do kubectl get all for Istio, like a simple command, which we don't have it today because nobody's going to get all the lists right.
In my mind, the biggest problem was that if you do Istio control get all, you get a lot of details for things like virtual service, like the number of ports and interesting things. The subsets are shown in the destination rule. If you do kube control get gateway destination rule virtual service, you don't get the subsets. Now I wanted to put the subsets in, but it turns out that due to some unfinished PRs in Kubernetes itself, when you add a custom column like the one I did for host or gateways, you can't specify certain kinds of JSON paths. Only the last item in the column can vary. And so many things in Istio are lists of structures that you can't use the existing kube control custom column render on server support. So that's the story with Istio control get.
Just to add one thing, I think being able to get all the Istio CRD is very useful, and I have some kind of analysis in my bash to enumerate all those Istio CRD and then call kubectl gate and get it, so I can have a quick view of all the Istio CRD applied in my cluster. I think that would be useful.
Maybe something like Istio control, what are my types? You could pipe into kube control get or something. That's very amusing. So everyone put your thoughts on that. The Istio control dashboard, which I put in one too. If you don't, so try it out if you're using master, and add or make PRs if you want to change it. The Meshify, which I just mentioned, that helps you with auto inject and auto inject. Lynn is proposing Istio control upgrade to upgrade Istio control and the control plane. And so these are the things that we're sort of thinking about for 1.2. If anyone has more items, sort of ping me and we'll discuss them in 2 weeks. So we're at the top of the hour, I guess. I monopolize everyone's time. Do we have any other things we want to discuss for this meeting? And do we have any volunteers to present their stuff at the next meeting so I don't have to drive everything? And
I know there was some mention of maybe another Kiali demonstration for next time to kind of maybe go into some of the debugging stuff that we have in there. Is that something that people would like to see for the next meeting?
Yes, and also the roadmap for Coyote. It's so you probably heard some of the discussion we had earlier. Is Coyote positioned as the Istio dashboard for everything that user wants to see within the Istio project as far as dashboard wise? So I think that would be good discussion to have because that's going to influence whether we can build another dashboard or whether we can, work with the Coyote team to get that done.
I think I think we need sort of a summary of what are the high-level dashboard functions that we need to see, and then understand which subset of those are in Kiali already, which ones could be added, and do we need a separate dashboard or not? So getting those answers is kind of an important part of the Kiali piece of this.
Yeah, I guess the only one today I don't see is the Grafana dashboard in Coyote. Most of the stuff seems already be in Coyote. I guess the other thing would be like some of the contact Istio tabs, either through us on Slack or Discuss.
Yeah, but I think there's a whole bunch of things that we're talking about that we'd like to sort of be able to do here that aren't anywhere yet, but can they be added to Kiali?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, great. So everyone use the Discuss, use the Slack, and talk to me, reach out for presentations. All right, I'm going to end the call. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Ed.
Thanks. Good discussion. Bye.